black storm coming. See the lightning strike. Black people rising.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Umoja Circle. My name is Keith Smokey Johnson, and for those of you who are new to the show, what the Umoja Circle is all about is that it's an African-centered talk show who corrects errors where errors are found and introduce facts where we find that so many people are working on fiction when it comes to who we are as African people historically. I started this show to bring light to truth about our people. And today's topic I'm going to talk about, it kind of proves that point that I've been doing this show for. In my mission statement that we are here to correct errors where errors are found and to introduce facts where we find so many people working on fiction when it comes to who we are historically as people of African descent, not only here but throughout the diaspora. It's going to be based on my discussion. Is going to be the first part of this two-part series. I'm going to start off with a movie that came out. I think it's in the middle of September. You might be familiar with this. I'll put a picture of this movie, and it's called The Woman King. And as you can see, it's about a fictitious general, but it's based on true events, starring Sister Viola Davis. And the reason that I'm going to make my talk in this portion of the discussion based on this movie is because even though we're in the information age in the 21st century, and since 1926, we have been having Black History Months. Well, it started with Black History Week in 1926 by Carter G. Woodson. I thought through the years that a lot of us kind of know a little bit more about our history than some of our ancestors did because of the way we were miseducated, according to Carter G. Woodson. But when I read many of the comments when this movie came out, boy, was I mistaken by what I've read in some of the comments. Now, don't get me wrong, about 90% of people who, 95% I would say, of people who have seen the movie were blown away by it, okay? It's a very powerful movie. I recommend it. I know what I read about some of the things that some people say, the little 5% or even less, some who never even read it and just went by the narrative that is found on the interwebs wrong. But it kind of bothers me that some of our people, I should say a lot, because again, a lot of the people who saw the movie of people of African descent really enjoyed it. But it was a way in which we are still caught up in a narrative that is not of our making and that still permeates this culture, this society, that even though many people got college degrees and all kinds of ways of knowing, when you could Google things and you could use the internet, man, mainly it just bothers me. I just want to start off by saying when a people's complex past is historically revealed, like this fictitious movie did, and I have no problem that it is fiction, but a lot of the contents in it has actual historical events. Some of the customs that you saw, the language with the foreign language of actual people. These events, even though fictionalized, were based on true events that happened. Okay, the timeline might be different, but that's what movies do. If you watch any cowboy movies, here in Texas, we have the Alamo, and the John Wayne version had no bit of truth in it at all, okay? But we still enjoyed it. I've been in Japan when I saw TV shows about the Bushidos or the great warriors, samurais. But they had movies and TV shows that were highly fictionalized, even though they might be talking about characters that actually exist. There's a great samurai warrior called Miyamoto Musashi. He's very famous in the 12th century of ancient Japan. And there were many movies with him. A lot of the things that were shown in the movie, he never did. But that's what any culture, any group should do. And I'm glad to see that the people who put this movie together and the brothers and sisters that put it together did it with respect and integrity when they portrayed these women that actually exist. I'm going to show you an image to show that these ladies did exist, that Viola Davis is portraying. She's portraying in the movie, she's a general, but she's based loosely on an actual person that existed. She wasn't a general. She didn't become a king, but this storyline introduced you to these women. That image right there is actually what they would call themselves, the Agoji, those women warriors of Dahomey, which is area in what is now known as Benin in Western Africa. And these are the women that movie is based on, and their role in fighting the invaders, what they considered the invaders, or the foreign invaders who were dealing with the enslaved show. We all struggle when we see our ancestors in their true three-dimensional form, okay? They're going to be good ones, they're going to be bad, they're going to be people who did things that in today's society wouldn't accept. One of the commentaries that seemed to initially permeate was the fact that the Dahomey Kingdom, when it was established, I think in 1720. It broke away from a much larger empire, and you got to understand the context of which things are being told. When you do research, and this is what I really want to talk about on this show, is that how do some people do research? I am not a historian, but I tried to do through this show, try to do the proper research that I learned from great scholars that I emulate. Like J.A. Rogers or Dr. Henry Clark or Dr. Ivan Van Serter, who wrote They Came Before Columbus, Amos Wilson. All these great scholars and writers I emulate. I try to use their examples of how to do research. Again, I am not a professional, but I try to do it that way. The movie, first of all, let me read something that came from a Screen magazine where professional writers, that's where I get my information from. And they'll explain the difference between the various types of fiction in which, and I'll try to explain what category the Woman King fall under. Let's start by saying there are 4 types of fictional screenplay stories. Okay, there's 4 types of them. And one, they come under these headings. You got stories that are based on a true story. You got stories that are based on true events. You got stories that are inspired by a true story. And you got stories that are inspired by true events. So all fictional movies come under one of these things. I would say that the Woman King comes under the last one, inspired by true events. Okay, each of these type of categories have a level of fiction interwoven in them. Okay, the kind of script takes this type of script, this Woman King. And the reason I'm giving you this portion, when you go into the past, you got to have the context in which you're talking about understood. Okay? That's why I say go see this movie. It is a good story. Even though it's fictional, it is inspired by true events. And the way the movie portrays the individuals that are there, that are African people, to me expresses a narrative that is contradictory to how we're usually portrayed. These people were shown with dignity. They showed their intelligence. They showed these women and men that were no different than the Romans and the Greeks in their philosophical, and they had their own customs. This is not the narrative that we get when we talked about why these people were enslaved. Okay, and I'm gonna get into that a little further on in the discussion. We're always shown as the dark continent, less than animals, had no kind of thought process. If you listen to the narratives that justified enslavement, and the fact that kingdoms like Dahomey might have participated what you would think as the slave trade, you got to understand the context in which it was done, and we'll talk about that. I think there's a word. There's two words I want you to look at to understand when we talk about research, because I hear this a lot on the Twitter and the Instagram and Facebook when people say, "Well, I've done research on this topic, whatever the current event of the day." This is a word. It might seem kind of strange. It's called synecdoche. Synecdoche, that's how it's pronounced. And what synecdoche is a technique that you see if you listen to any of the Republican narratives when it comes to how they justify the things they do, or black people in their perspective. They take a small, tiny bit of something and they blow it up as if it's the whole thing. Okay, it's part of a thing. Like when we talk about the white nationalist violence that's going on today, that deal with gun-carrying white male, they always bring up, South side of Chicago, black on black crime. Okay, that's a form of synecdoche. And what it is, that if you look at the percentage of black on black crime, first of all, because of the racist system that we are established, this is the context I'm going to be coming from, you're going to have of course, you're going to have, and you got redlining, which forced a lot of blacks into these low-income areas that you find throughout America to this very day. They didn't go there by will. After they were so-called freed, we were funneled into these ghettos based by redlining, based on the system of the United States, based on the laws. So when you do any kind of survey, of course, when you have a concentrated of the same people, the numbers are going to be high. But if you dilute that out and throughout the American population, is a tiny fraction. Not every black person sells drugs. Not every black person shoots and kills. Not every black person carry a gun and are dangerous. But that's the synecdoche that's been used to define us, to justify rules, to justify the criminal justice system. When you do your research, you must understand, you must figure that out. Okay? And when a system is using that to bring about their point of view. Okay, and also the fact that some people, like during the Atlantic slave trade, were Africans, to act like the Africans who were involved in the slave trade were the ones who started the slave trade and benefited from the slave trade. And we'll talk about that. The next word I want to use is epistemology. And that's an important subject. That means the knowledge. Epistemology means, what is the source of your knowledge? If you don't ask that when you do the research about a movie or about the content in which that movie is being expressed, and if you just listen to somebody else's content with not understanding the content, we have a lot of people, that terminology being used it has a lot to do. You got to also understand the intent of that content. What is the purpose of that person writing? Who are they backing? What are their belief systems? So you just can't find an article on the internet and Google it, and then that's your source of knowledge. Well, who wrote that article? Who do they work for? What's the purpose of the organization that's backing them? Okay? Does it serve a purpose that is beneficial to us as people of African descent, or are they some kind of right-wing, crazy organization? And you got to understand the epistemology. That is, what is the source of the knowledge that you're looking at? Okay, where are you gaining your information? If you don't ask that about articles, about YouTube videos, about the contents or the intent of the content, then you are going to go down various different rabbit holes, and it's going to muddy the waters of truth. And that's what I saw when I looked at the comments that were being first put out about the woman king. People didn't have a clue. That's why I made the joke that I thought that we understood that the people of African descent who were involved in the slave trade were victims. They were not the perpetrators of that. That's Connecticut, that small, minute people along the west coast of Africa who came in contact first in 1471, the first European to contact along the west coast in what is known as Elmina, were the Portuguese. But they had the guns, they had the technology. And what was going on the west coast of Africa, you had all these empires, these great empires that existed in the Western Africa. You had the Ghana Empire that lasted from 330 BC to 1246 AD. That's a long time. Then you had the Mali Empire that produced Mansa Musa. I'm going to talk more about that in the second show. You had the Songhai Empire. And then you had the Oyo and various different other empires. So all these empires, when they started breaking up, there's always going to be conflicts. Okay? So this is the thing that we got to understand, the context of how things are portrayed and in your research and what knowledge you're gaining. There's the next image. This is something that always gets to me. Excuse me. You know, we always say African or Africa. I heard one in talking about describing the woman king. I saw one right-wing Republican commentator said, you know, in a stately voice that if it wasn't for the Africans, there would be no African slave trade, which is a ridiculous statement. If it wasn't for all the Europeans who benefited. Now, when you say Africans, what do you mean Africans? Look at that image. These are people that, they all look black, but they had different languages. They had different cultural nuances, different religions. You know, when you say Africans, who are you talking about? Or Africans participated in the slave trade, which is a ridiculous statement. The next image will give you a better view of what I'm talking about. This is what we're talking about. There's something like 1,500, at least, to maybe 2,000 different languages, ethnic groups. That's a continent, not a country. And when we talk about African people in the 15th and 16th and 17th century, and we come in contact, we talk about, well, there was slavery in Africa. Again, in what context are you talking about? What's the epistemology? What is the source of your knowledge? What are you talking about? What is the context that you're bringing that information in? For example, yes, there was something. Let's go back and use this word slavery, slave. Are we using the term that those people in many different forms used? Or are we using European, the people who conquered and abused the African continent to this very day with their colonizations and their influence for 500 to 600 years? We talk from the 1400s when the Portuguese first came in contact in what is now known as Ghana. Okay, we're using the word slave. Slaves come from a European paradigm. The slaves came from the word that used to be, that we talk about, the Slavic people, Slavs, who are Eastern European types. They were abused when the Ottomans came. They were abused and put into this Western form of enslavement and abuse. So much that their ethnicity became a terminology for people who were put into servitude, okay, which went on like in 900 AD, Slavic slaves. But when we use that, we're coming from that European perspective. In Africa, their terminology for what you would call slavery was more like indentured servitude. Like I said earlier, you had all these empires breaking up. And when you break up empires, just like the Soviet Union broke up, what happened? You had people who were under this Soviet Union started to reassert themselves and fight for their independence. And before they were put under this rule of the Soviet, or when the people who were conquered under the Ottoman, when it broke up, there were conflicts and disruptions that were going on. There was a country called Yugoslavia that I remember growing up that don't exist, but it was made up of cobbled together countries from World War I. And you had all this conflict in the 90s, Kosovo and all these other conflicts. So when people are reassessing, and at that point in African history, when the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire, and the Oyo Empire were breaking up, then you had these people like the Kingdom of Dahomey that became the Kingdom of Dahomey, fighting each other. All those people that you saw with that image did not see themselves like we tend to use this 21st century perspective of black unity. That came out after 400 years of abuse in America into the late 1960s, okay? But the people that we are made of, we are Igbo, we're Angolan, we come from the Congo, we come from Ghana, we come from various different tribes in what is now known as Nigeria. We come from all those different things. We all look black, okay? It's just like we don't have a visceral response when we look at Europeans fighting Europeans throughout the ages, right? When the Romans conquered the Germans, or they went into Britain and conquered the Brits, the white people fighting white people. When the Roman Empire broke up, there was turmoil, disruption. So why is it different when Africans do it? Why is it different when we have this visceral? Because you want to maintain a narrative, but the people who created this system that benefited Europe but did not benefit, and if you look at it deeper, it was a horrendous system to a continent of people. And how could you justify a land of the free and the home of the brave and this Western concept? The Western world that we know, what does that mean? The Western world is a conglomeration between Western Europe and North America. That's what comprised the Western world. And what made it so was the black bodies that were brought on over by the Atlantic slave trade. And to justify that, the wealth that was produced, that made England what it is, that made France what it is, was the black bodies of those many different people. You can't, not only did the people who came over here that looked like me had to understand each other, they had to understand a totally different language, English. It's just like the Japanese going over with a ship and grabbing a German, grabbing somebody from France, grabbing somebody from England, Norway, Sweden, Belgium, the Netherlands, put them in a boat, and then taking them to a totally different country called Japan, and all those different people had to understand that language of Japanese. That's what these people had to do, and we came out of it pretty good, in a sense. Somewhat damaged if you look at our people, but we were not brought here to be anything but a permanent working force. So my point is this, and again, how did the Europeans look at the people of Northern Europe, the Romans and the Greeks? I had some other videos, but I'm gonna wait till the next show to show that, and we'll start from that point. Because the justification of the Atlantic slave trade was the fact that we were bringing these people out of darkness. All those people that you saw on the screen just a few minutes ago. All right, not the dignity of what the woman king showed, but this dark continent, this near animalistic people, and not the great people, no different than Europe, no different than China, no different than India. They saw each other as individual groups. They didn't see each other as black power yet. That's an American phenomenon. So the context in which we do things is important, brothers and sisters. And this is the point I want to bring forth. That you've got to understand the epistemology and you understand the tricks of a synecdoche when you deal with our history and what's being portrayed. Go see the Woman King. I hope it inspires you to study our history even better. So until next time, peace, hotep, bye-bye.